So, my name's Kanak. I'm a professional tutor at the Academic Achievement Center, and I'm doing this presentation for graduate students or other students who are interested in understanding more about academic integrity and why it's a not so good thing. In fact, if you were to ask me what I personally believe, and we'll be hearing this quite a bit, plagiarism is murder. This is a presentation on how to avoid the most heinous academic sin. Let's get into it. So, what's plagiarism, Sherlock? Well, to answer that, let's play two truths and a lie. Watson. As you can see, I am both Sherlock and Watson, so you don't have to feel that bad about yourselves. That said, I am going to ask for some audience participation. What do you guys think is the lie amongst these three statements? Is plagiarism the worst? Is plagiarism the thing that'll potentially fail you? Is plagiarism that thing only when you straight up copy and paste from Wikipedia? Any takers? No? None? That's cool.
Brittany's raising her hand.
Oh, go for it. Let me do this. Oops. Yeah, Brittany.
Oh, I think I may be doing this wrong because I think it's 3 truths and no lie.
Ooh, you would be somewhat incorrect.
Maybe. Can I change my answer?
Of course you may.
Is it 1 and 2?
1 and 2 are the truths. That's correct.
Woo! Okay.
And this is why 3 is the lie. So yes, you are lame when you straight up copy and paste from Wikipedia, but that's not the only type of plagiarism. See, I got tricksy. It's what I do.
I see. Only was the word that tripped me up, but I'm good now.
Correct. That's also a good test taking tip. When you see strong generalizations, look at them and evaluate them more closely. Now, what is plagiarism? Well, plagiarism as defined by Lasell University is right here. It's copy pasted and it's in-text cited for you. You can go to Lasell's website, you can type in academic integrity and bam, you get this, right? It's a bit lengthy, it's a bit wordy, but what's it actually saying? The act of taking or passing off another's ideas or writing as one's own. Basically, if you take someone's words, you throw it in your paper and you don't cite, you don't say where you got them from, that's plagiarism, right? Copying or paraphrasing another's words without credit, again, plagiarism. Buying or accepting work and presenting it as one's own, that's plagiarism. You're still taking someone else's ideas and you're saying that they're yours. And then finally, like, students bear the responsibility for demonstrating the evolution of original work. You have to kind of show how you got to where your ideas are. It's not just enough to say like, yo, this is me. You have to show that through careful analysis and quote integration. And we'll go into what all of that means in just a hot sec. So here's some examples of the big bad plagiarism. Copying, pasting from anywhere, not just Wikipedia. Paraphrasing an original thought that isn't yours without a citation. Presenting uncommon knowledge without a citation. Now this is very important. Uncommon versus common knowledge. There's some facts that you just don't have to cite. If you were to say, for example, that the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, you don't have to give a citation for that. Why? Because that's common knowledge.
Is it?
It would be, or it should be, right? That's the hope. But there are some aspects that aren't common knowledge. For example, if you were to say that the largest signature on the Declaration of Independence was John Hancock, and it had a certain purpose, right? And you were to explain what that purpose was, you would have to give a citation, unless you're explaining that purpose from your own interpretation of why his signature is the largest. Now, if you pay your ex-roomie to write your paper because they know words gooder than you, we need to like hold up because gooder is not a real word. So again, you have to like check yourself before you wreck yourself. Don't pay people to write your paper. One, they're not going to be able to do it as well as you. Two, because they're like getting money for it, they're not going to put a lot of effort into it, right? They're just going to do the bare minimum. And that's not what you want when you're writing your papers. Again, asking like a friend or a cousin to like proofread a paper and then knowing they're going to change entire paragraphs or entire sections of your paper, that's also plagiarism. It's one thing to go through with a tutor or to go through with a friend and have them proofread your paper. It's a completely different thing to be like, yo, can you check this? And just make whatever changes you want, not knowing what those changes are. They're changing your ideas, they're putting their own ideas. It's basically not your work at that point. Does anyone have any other ideas of what plagiarism or examples of plagiarism? I'll give you, oh, Brittany, please.
Having your mom write your paper.
That is definitely an example of plagiarism, yes. Another example of plagiarism that's very important, and it's in the, like, it's under academic integrity, is presenting old work that you've written as new work. So let's say you're writing a paper and last year you wrote a paper on, or let's say you're writing a paper this year on the Revolutionary War. And last year you wrote a paper on the Revolutionary War. You can't take the paper you wrote last year and submit it this year. You'd be plagiarizing yourself, right? And it's like, how can I plagiarize myself? Well, you are, because you're not presenting any new information, right? That's the big part of plagiarism, is creating something new, being original. So keep that in mind and like understand that you can get in trouble for that. So it's something to avoid.
Question.
Yes.
Can you reference your previous paper and then cite it?
You can, and you should.
Okay.
In fact, you could say like in an earlier paper that I've like written, or I've developed this thought, I came here. From this thought, I'm now moving to this new thought here, and you can show the new progression, right? The purpose of plagiarism, the reason that plagiarism is so important is because it's about denying the progression, denying what was in the past. And we're going to get into how that's like hurting people, right? So like no one reads the academic catalog. I'm not hurting anyone if I plagiarize, right? Well, you are. Why? Because plagiarism is murder.
Say it together.
Everyone together now. Plagiarism is murder.
Murder.
Good. The recording loved that. All right. Yeah. So I've been saying that like plagiarism is murder, and there's a bunch of blanks on your screen. You guys can fill in the words. Just don't say them out loud, please. Because again, this is being recorded, but let's look at how plagiarism is murder, right? Where did I come up with this like conception or this idea? Descartes writes or wrote like, ego cogito ergo sum. My Latin is terrible. Please don't record me speaking in Latin. Too late.
Too late.
Which colloquially has been translated to I think, therefore I am. When we look at this colloquialization or this translation of Descartes' words, we can like start to extrapolate or start to get to some new ideas, right? We could start to see that this can then be reinterpreted as my thoughts grant my existence, right? Accepting thoughts or ideas then means that my ideas grant my existence. I hope you guys can see where I'm going with this. Since murder is denying someone continued existence, when you like shank someone, you basically stayed, you can't continue living anymore, right? You're denying their existence. Then if we consider that, like, and we consider that plagiarism is the theft of an idea and disguising it as your own, then you're also denying them their existence. You're basically saying like, yo, this person who I copy pasted from, you don't exist anymore, right? And what does that mean? Say it with me now. Plagiarism
is murder.
Murder.
Good, right? So this is like the crux of why like I consider plagiarism to be an ethical sin, right? You don't have to fully agree with me. Like it is a pretty loose proof. It's not, but it is a little loose. It's a little out there. That said, like the reason academia really cares about plagiarism is that bibliographies and citations are the currency of academia. The more you get cited, the more prominent you are within your field, right? And this is something to be very mindful of, especially as graduate students, because a large part of graduate work is contributing to a field. You are writing a thesis, you're developing ideas, you're getting work published. So part of that is to like build your repertoire and build your reputation within the community. If you're stealing your ideas, you're preventing someone else from building that reputation, right? So even if you don't want to consider plagiarism murder, which it is and you should, it's still abject theft or abject theft, not object theft. That A looks like an O, it's a terrible font, my B. As students, you'll be contributing ideas yourselves. If you plagiarize, you're basically saying it's chill to steal your ideas and your existence. You're giving license to other people to do what you're doing, right? There's a whole beautiful argument about this in Deontology, written by Immanuel Kant. It's something to look at. It's something you can talk to me about. I love Kant.
I can't wait.
What?
I can't wait.
Kant puns are the best. All right. So what can be done about plagiarism, right? How can we stop this death from happening in our papers, this murder, right? Well, it's super easy and it's barely an inconvenience. There's three big things that you can do to effectively stop yourself from plagiarizing. The first are block quotes, the second is quote integration, and the third is paraphrasing. So we're going to go over the advantages and disadvantages of these real quick. So the advantages for block quotes: there's lots of text to work with. They take up a lot of space in your papers. They save you the trouble of having to in-text cite a million times for info all coming from the same passage. They can break the monotony of your pages aesthetically. And finally, they offer a mechanism for analysis, right? Block quotes are like some of my favorite things to use or to integrate. Sometimes I'll start a paper with a block quote simply because it gives me a frame of reference, or it gives the reader a frame of reference on what I am writing about or what I am working with. Now, quote integration. Quote integration is simply using quotation marks and copy pasting the words of another writer into your own work, right? You can also quote like article, you can also quote YouTube videos, you can quote songs, you can quote almost anything, right? And it helps in terms of syntactical flow in your writing, right? You can like say something along the lines of, for example, comma, quote, or for example, Stewart writes, comma, quote. And it just flows really nice, right? It offers an easier mechanism for direct analysis than the block quote, because when you have a block quote, you have to go back and refer to the block quote. With a quotation, with quote integration, you don't have to do that so much. You can kind of just tie it right into your sentence. Quote integration is considered the most artistic in terms of writing. For the most part, it's like you can, because you're like weaving it into your paper, it's just considered like, oh, like such a great quote integrator. And who doesn't want to be called a great quote integrator? Beyond that, like beyond demonstrating your writing prowess, you also get to use the square parentheses. And this is where quotes have like, or the quotes, integrated quotes shine the most. I love like in square parentheses, partially because you can put emojis into them, right? And then it looks like you have like an emoji in your paper, even though it's necessary. It's great. We'll get into that in a sec. And finally, paraphrasing, right? It takes out some of the guesswork from the quote. There's no need to copy or paste anything. You're getting to use your words to break down like a more complex idea. And then oftentimes you can use this to simultaneously present analysis. There could be some more advantages. I don't know. We can like think about it, imagine them. It's cool. Now, since we just did advantages, the disadvantages, right? We have paraphrasing. It's easy to misinterpret the quote or concept that we are trying to paraphrase, right? If we get something lengthy or long, and we're trying to break it down, we could make a mistake with it, right? That puts the onus, or that puts like the weight of quoting, or when we paraphrase, on us, right? If we get it wrong, then that's easy for the professor or like the grader or whoever's reading it to be like, this person doesn't know how to analyze correctly because the original work didn't say that. They're making that up, right? Again, changing just a couple words could change the whole meaning of a sentence, right? For example, like if we go to I think, therefore I am, if we say I am, therefore I think, for example, if we were to reverse the quote in our like assessment, it changes the entire meaning of what is being put forward. Paraphrasing can sometimes come off as lazy. You didn't go through the trouble of putting in quotation marks. You didn't go through the trouble of like putting in a quote and then fully analyzing it, right? And finally, like it's hard to know what you're paraphrasing when you go back to the main text. Sometimes when you paraphrase, you don't know where you paraphrased from. You were like getting a generic idea, you kind of threw it in, and then when you go back or you're looking for that information, you're just like, what was I like talking about? I don't know. Now, block quotes. They can be bulky. If we block quote too much or too big a passage, it looks really bad on us, right? If we use too many block quotes, we're basically not showing our own work, right? That we can also be quoting stuff that has no relevance to our papers. We can waste space and can derail like a good flow. Sometimes you have like a really nice flow going and all of a sudden you see like a giant block quote and you're like, why, man? Why do I have to read someone else's words? Your words were so beautiful and rich. And now I got to read this like loser. And you're like, well, that's because the block quote was there. Too bad. Finally, it can sometimes come off as lazy. You're going to see that with all three of these. Quote integration. It can be difficult to conform sentences into your flow. So what happens is when you integrate a quote, it can be hard sometimes. Sometimes it's not written in the same tense you're using, or sometimes it's just jarringly out there. Additionally, when you're trying to bring in a quote or weave it into your sentence, you can lose what you're trying to say, trying to like get the message across of what the writer was saying or the original writer was saying. There's also nuance to punctuation that can be exceptionally annoying. Knowing where to put your periods and your commas and your semicolons and your question marks when you quote integrate can be like cumbersome. And then finally, like it can sometimes come off as lazy. Now, the reason all three of these have it can sometimes come off as lazy is because just quoting isn't enough. You can't just simply say like, oh, this is what this person said. You have to add to the conversation. That's what plagiarism is trying to help you avoid. Just repeating what someone else said. If I just need to repeat what someone else said, then I can just read what they said. There's no reason for me to even open the Word document. I'm a lazy person. You should also be effectively lazy too. So do yourself and save yourself the effort. If you're going to put effort in and quote something, make sure you also put in the effort then to analyze it, to say what you're getting from there. Take that next step. If you don't need to take that step, then you don't need to be writing that paper. Finally, let's get into some examples of block quotes. These are all examples from my writing. So you guys can like look at it, analyze it, and be like, this guy's insane and crazy. But the purpose of this, the reason I'm using my writing is so that you can see that I'm not plagiarizing in the presentation about plagiarizing. Block quotes, they should start on their own line. See, you can see that up here. Let me pull up the annotate tools. You can kind of see that up here. It's like starting on its own line. It's like ending on its own line, and it's segmented inwards. There's an indent to demonstrate that it is not part of the main passage or the main paragraph, right? Additionally, like a big part of this is also that the in-text citation that's like here and over here, it doesn't have to be in like this part of the sentence. It can be outside of the sentence. For this type of like really nitty-gritty detail orientation, what you can do or what you should look at is Purdue Owl. Purdue Owl is going to be your best friend as a graduate student. They've done all the work of explaining how quotes should be integrated, how to do in-text citations. I can't emphasize it enough. If you have a question, check out Purdue Owl before anything else. It'll save you so much time and effort. And we're going to check out how to exactly use it and navigate it in this quick sec. Oops. The annotate tools are now annoying me. All right. Mouse. Cool. There we go. Quote integration. So here's me integrating a quote. You can see that I've used the block, the square brackets here, right? This is a short like quote integration, but the idea is still there, right? We can write a sentence and then integrate the quote to be part of what we're saying, but still have our message getting across, right? It's rather simple to do these. I really like them, as I said before, because of the emoji thing that you can do when you properly use a semicolon or colon within your quote. Another thing that can be really well done with the square brackets is to identify what is being talked about. Sometimes a sentence that you're quoting will say like this, blah, 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 but no one knows what the this is referring to. And then you can say like in square brackets, like this argument or this segment or this idea and explain what that idea is and go forward from there. So paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is probably the hardest to provide an example of, only because what's required in paraphrasing is not only the example, but also the place where it was paraphrased from. And so without doing like a full lesson on close reading, the main idea here is that you can state a fact or something that isn't well known, such as Sophocles therefore situates Oedipus as the embodiment of philosophy. Like this is a quote from this book. You can stipulate that, or you can put that forward as an idea. And you can say like, this is the idea that I took from this guy named Hamilton. His name's John Hamilton. He's a professor, he's a writer. And I borrowed this from his book. And so that's the purpose of paraphrasing, is taking something very complex or a very complex idea and synthesizing or breaking it down into something that's like parsable or usable within the framework of a larger argument. Now, that was a lot of information. So we're just gonna cut to like a beautiful, fun picture about academic integrity, right? It's a small investment, lifetime returns. This girl's haircut is whack. It's kind of fun. Like you guys can chill for just a sec. If there are any questions that anyone has, shoot them now. This is like the question and answer portion of the presentation. You can also ask questions that you think other graduate students might want to ask. All right.
Kanak, I have a question.
Thank you.
How does somebody judge when they're sort of crossing a line between paraphrasing and when they should be using a direct quote? You know what I mean?
I do.
Paraphrasing too much, too closely?
Yes. So sometimes what happens is like when you do paraphrase someone too closely, it's better. It's always the question here is what am I adding to this conversation, right? And what am I bringing, or what is being brought in? So if we go to like the example from before here, right? Like Sophocles therefore situates Oedipus as the embodiment of philosophy, right? Here, like the main idea or the main purpose of this person's book is to argue that Sophocles, that Oedipus is the embodiment of philosophy in like Sophocles's work, right? That's not an idea that I came up with. The therefore here is part of my own analysis, hence like the paraphrase. If I needed to make a direct quote, if I needed to like bring in something that was like very detailed or much more nuanced than this to show how this person has arrived at this conclusion, then I would need to use a direct quote. Does that somewhat answer your question, Stephen? Okay, great. Moving forward.
I have a question, actually,
Oh.
Kanak.
Okay, awesome.
The opposite, when somebody directly quotes too much and they should paraphrase, is there a way to kind of give a guideline for that?
There is. So, and it's a fine line that gets improved with writing a lot or reading a lot, as it were. But when you have like a very long and very involved quote, and this happens more often with block quotes than they do with direct like quote integration. When you have like a very large block quote, you need to look at what is the message of this block quote. Why am I using so much text to say something? Can I say that in smaller or in like fragmented words, right? And from there, if you can say it in a more synthesized way, then you know to paraphrase, right? If it's really necessary for you to use like the words as they're written by someone else, then you should do so. But if you can synthesize it, it's always usually better to synthesize. Just make sure you attribute what you're synthesizing to the person from whom you're synthesizing from. Does that answer your question, Karen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So let's check out Purdue Owl. So real quick, I'm going to stop the share. I'm going to pull up a new share, and we're going to check out how to get to Purdue Owl. So I'm a person who loves Bing, right? It always has these beautiful pictures, whatever. I'm not going to sell you guys on Bing, but I am going to sell you guys on Purdue Owl. So right now I've already typed up Purdue Owl MLA. But let's say you do APA, right? They got APA. Let's say you do Chicago Manual of Style, right? I don't know why you would, but hey, that's like what some people have to go through. I pity you. But let's just say APA, because that's like a very common format. You click here, it's usually like the first or second link. You can see both of these first two links are to Purdue Owl. We can click like the APA style introduction. My computer is mad slow, so bear with me. We can say got it down there, but this is what it looks like. This will be the APA style introduction. Now over here in the bar, on the like left-hand side, you have ads. But more than ads, you have a lot of information, and it can be daunting, right? It's like, where do I go? What do I need to do? The good thing is that like for APA and stuff like that, like each of these takes you to where you might need to go. Additionally, you can always search the OWL like map by going to either the site map or simply going back to Google and checking things up. For MLA style, like they do the exact same thing, and you can click there, go to the introduction, and it's there. You're going to always want to usually check out the style guide, because the style guide is going to provide you with this really fancy tool right up here, which is how to cite your source automatically in MLA. You just basically can search your source or type in your source, and it does the work for you. I'm all about letting technology do the work for me, right? But remember, sometimes you do have to double check to make sure technology isn't failing us, right? That said, for like MLA especially, you can see like all of these aspects are here. You have like how to basic format, how to cite books, how to cite like whatever question you have to have, it's there, right? Like this is just how to cite, how to like set up your paper. But more than that, you can also see like that there's like an in-text citation guide. And when you click on this, this will tell you when you're dealing with different types of sources, how to cite those sources correctly. For example, like this is how you cite an author page style, right? You can, if you've already stated the author's name, like this has, like Wordsworth stated that romantic poetry was marked by a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, 263. You don't need to write Wordsworth 263, right? That's an MLA. APA has a similar setup. You'll see that there's a lot of style overlap between MLA and APA, but you should use the one that works for you and the one that is asked of you, right? The reason that there's so many different style guides is that the different subjects or like the different schools, they all have like their own emphasis on what is important and what is necessary to find information, right? For example, for MLA, which is used a lot in language or English language, especially in literature, what's very important is what is exactly written, right? You need to go directly to the quote. You need to go directly to what was written and to see how it was written, because close reading is a large part of that school of thought. In other schools, like you'll see a heavier emphasis on the year things were published. That's like APA. Why? Because they care about they care about knowing when something came out, as opposed to where exactly that information came from, right? For example, an APA does a lot of statistics work. They want to know how old are these statistics, more importantly than where in a like 20-page research study that was found. So that's just like a general use of how to use these things. Now, another thing that is a really useful tool that we talked about was EasyBib. I love EasyBib. I use EasyBib on all of like my papers. And what EasyBib does is EasyBib does the work of creating a bibliography for you. You can basically like, you can use it to check your paper. I don't think that's really that necessary. I use it to create the citations, and from here you can basically enter in like a book or a source, and it will like type it up. So let's say we say the Odyssey, right? It will like allow you to search. It'll give you a whole bunch of different sources for the Odyssey. You can find the one you're looking for. Let's say like this was the one that we needed. Boom, it'll give you all the pertinent information. You say continue, right? And it will then like allow you to fill in any extra information from the book that you might need to. And then you can say complete citation, right? Once that's done, again, ignore all the CVS stuff, the targeted ads. That's my life. It'll give you the citation in the format you're asking for. Up here, we were asking for MLA 8. This is in that format. This is the correct citation for that format. Again, if you need to add more information, you can. It provides you the boxes to do so. It's a fantastic tool. Now let's stop there. Let's go back to sharing the presentation. And guess what, guys? We're done. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. You are always welcome to email me. I'm a strong believer of the only stupid question is the unasked question, unless I tell you otherwise. So please ask your questions. Please like talk to me. I'm here to listen. And I'm also here to explain. So with that said, if there are any questions, if there are any comments, shoot them now or forever hold your peace. Thank you.